Hey there, I'm Ashley from the Loopy Lamb. Halloween is right around the corner, and today I'm sharing an easy Halloween crochet pattern that's easy enough for beginners to make. Meet the Candy Corn Cutie Crew. In this step-by-step crochet tutorial, I'll show you how to make the mini size of my adorable candy corn project. It's a quick stash busting project that's great for Halloween decorations, fall markets, handmade gifts, or if you're just looking for a quick and easy fall-themed project to make. The free written pattern for the mini size is linked in the description box below, and if you fall in love with these cuties like I did, there's also a printable PDF available in my Etsy and Ravelry shops, and it includes all 5 sizes of the Candy Corn Cutie Crew, so you can make your own spooky sweet squad. So let's cover the materials that you'll need to follow along with today's tutorial.
Here are the materials that you're going to need in order to follow along with today's tutorial. You'll need an 8mm or M crochet hook. You'll need some super bulky weight plushie type yarn. This is Bernat Blanket. Color A is Bernat Blanket in white, and color B is Bernat Blanket Brights in the color Carrot Orange, and color C is Bernat Blanket Brights in the color School Bus Yellow. You'll also need approximately 1 yard each of worsted weight yarn in white and black for embroidery. You'll need a set of safety eyes in 16mm. I used these golden glitter safety eyes that I got from Chateau Bornay Crochet. You'll need some polyfill toy stuffing, a pair of scissors, a tapestry needle, and some stitch markers. I recommend using these locking stitch markers when you're doing amigurumi, and a scrap piece of yarn. If you're concerned about wanting to make sure your toy turns out to be the expected size, or you're short on yarn, then you might want to get match gauge, and then you'll need a tape measure or a ruler in order to measure your gauge. You'll see that I'll be using a different yarn weight, different yarn colors, and a different hook size in this tutorial. All were selected to make this tutorial easier for you to see, because these colors don't show up great when you're stitching, especially with the plushy yarn. It can be harder to see. But you can follow along with what I'm doing in the tutorial using these materials. The pattern is the same. I'm just using different materials to make it easier for you to see. All of my sample images for this pattern are done using the yarn under single crochet, but you're going to see me use the regular single crochet here in this tutorial. The toy can be made with either stitch, and if you're not familiar with the yarn under single crochet, you can find a tutorial for that here on my channel. And just keep in mind that if you're using the yarn regular single crochet stitch, that your toy could turn out a little bit bigger than when you use the yarn under single crochet, and it could use a little bit more yarn. So let's clear off my workspace here, and we'll dive into making our crochet candy corn pattern. All right, to start our crochet candy corn, we're going to start with color A. If you're making it with traditional candy corn colors, that would be the white yarn. And as I've already mentioned, I'm using different colors today to make it easier for you to see. We start round 1 of our candy corn with a magic circle. And to do that, we're going to lay our tail end of our yarn across our palm of our non-dominant hand and pin it down with our thumb. Using your dominant hand, we're going to wrap the working end of the yarn around the first 2 fingers, around the back, and bring it around the front, crossing it over itself to create an X. Now, while you hold on to the working end of the yarn, you're going to flip your non-dominant hand over, bringing the yarn with you to create 2 parallel yarn lines across your fingers, and then you pin the working yarn down between your ring finger and your pinky to hold it in place. Now we're going to grab our crochet hook and insert it under the first strand and over the first. Then we're going to use our hook to pull that second strand out and under the first until we have a little bit of a triangle forming there. Then we're going to twist our crochet hook to create a cross in the yarn that you can see right here. Then we're going to yarn over with this yarn that's between the ring finger and the middle finger and pull that through the loop on our hook that we created. And you've just completed your magic circle, so you can take your fingers out of the ring. And then you see how you've got your yarn tail tucked into the magic ring there. We're going to pull that out and you're ready to start crocheting. Now, if you need to see that slower, you can either replay what we just did and adjust the speed settings down in the right-hand corner of your YouTube player there, or you can check out my tutorial for absolute beginners here on how to make the magic circle or magic ring. So for round 1, we're going to work 6 single crochets into the magic ring. And this toy is worked from the top down. So we're going to insert a hook into the magic ring. We want to work under the strand of the magic ring and our yarn tail. Then we're going to yarn over and pull up a loop. Should have 2 loops on your hook. Then we're going to yarn over and pull through both loops on our hook to finish our first single crochet. And now we need to do 5 more single crochets, and all of them are worked into the ring. So again, back into the ring, yarn over and pull up a loop. Should have 2 loops on your hook. Then yarn over and pull through both loops. And that's your second single crochet. Again, back into the ring, yarn over, 2 loops on your hook, yarn over and pull through 2, and that's your third single crochet. So we're going to do this 3 more times, so we have a total of 6 single crochets. So now that we have our 6 single crochets, I recommend at the end of every round that you count the number of stitches you have to make sure that you have the correct number. Amigurumi toys have a lot of shaping and so are dependent on having the right number of stitches before you continue on. So to check the number of stitches, we'll turn our piece upwards so we can see all the tops of the stitches, which look like little V's. I like to start counting from my hook and backwards. The yarn on your hook never counts as a stitch. So we're going to start counting the V's here. Again, this doesn't count. And we're going to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And it looks like I only have 5, but your first stitch is often tight when you do your first round. And so you might find the little V is off and down towards the side here. So I do have 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. Once you have your 6 stitches, you're going to grab your yarn tail with one hand, hold on to your stitches with the other, and you're going to pull to close the magic ring. Right? Once you have it closed, it should look something like this. All right, so grab your stitch marker because you're going to need that in just a moment. And we're moving on to round 2. Before we move on to round 2, if you want to make sure that your toy turns out to be the exact size I've specified, or as close to the exact size specified, and that you're using the right amount of yarn, this is where you would check your gauge. I build in my gauge swatches into my pattern so that way you don't have to stop crocheting. So we've got our piece here, and we're going to measure it across the widest point from front loop to front loop. So I'm going to pull my hook out of the way here, grab my tape measure, and it should measure approximately 1 inch across, measured from front loop to front loop if you're using the blanket yarn or the super bulky weight yarn that we talked about in the materials list. For me, I'm using a worsted weight yarn, so mine is between 1/2 and 3/4 inch here, and that is the gauge if you're using the worsted weight yarn. All right, so now we're going to move on to round 2. For round 2, we're going to start with a single crochet increase into that first stitch. Now, single crochet increase means you work 2 single crochet stitches into the first stitch. So let's do that together. We're going to insert a hook under both loops of that first stitch. And then we'll single crochet. Now that my first stitch is done, I'm going to grab my stitch marker and place that under both loops of that first stitch. And we're going to continue to mark that first stitch of the round and move our stitch marker up so we can always keep track of where the first stitch of the round is. So we've done half of our single crochet increase, so we're going to go back into the same stitch and single crochet a second time. And that is our single crochet increase completed. Now we're going to work 1 single crochet into each of the next 2 stitches. So into the next stitch, 1 single crochet, into the next stitch, 1 single crochet. All right, and then we're going to work a single crochet increase into this next stitch. So again, that's 2 single crochets, worked into the same stitch. There's one, back into the same stitch. There's two. And then we're going to work 1 single crochet into each of the remaining 2 stitches. At the end of round 2, you should have 8 single crochet stitches. So now we're moving into round 3. We're going to move that stitch marker out of the way. And in our first stitch, we're going to work 1 single crochet. Then we're going to move our stitch marker up and place that into that new stitch. And now I'm just going to flip my toy because it's starting to curve a bit, because we are essentially creating a giant cone. So there should be some curving or curling of your piece. And I'll show you in a minute when we have some more stitches on how to tell the right side versus the wrong side, but the right side of your work should be facing you, right? So we've worked 1 single crochet. Now we're going to work 1 single crochet into each of the next 2 stitches. So here's 1, and here's 2. And then we're going to work a single crochet increase into the next stitch. So there's 1 single crochet, back into the same stitch, and here's the second single crochet. And now we're going to work 1 single crochet into each of the next 3 stitches. There's 1, 2, and 3. And then we're going to single crochet increase into that last stitch. There's 1, back into the same stitch, and there's 2. At the end of round 3, you should have 10 single crochet stitches. Now at this point, I recommend taking a moment to secure your magic ring. Either you can tie a couple of knots in it or weave in your ends. It's up to you. I'm just going to tie a couple of knots in it here so we can get going quickly. The rest of my yarn tail will remain inside the toy, as it's just additional stuffing and I don't have to worry about it. Now we've got a couple of extra stitches here. It's still kind of hard to tell at this point because our piece is so small, but for the right side versus the wrong side, when you're using a regular single crochet like I'm doing here, you'll see that we have these straight lines across the back of our piece. That is the inside of your piece, or the wrong side. And when you flip your toy to the right side, what you should see are little V's. Okay? I know it's a little hard to see because the toy is so small at this point, but as you crochet more, you will see that clearly. All right, so now we are going to need to finish off because we're going to change our colors to the next yarn color. Now, when you work in a continuous spiral, there's often what's called a jog, which is like a little step in your color changes. We're going to use a technique called the invisible join, which can help minimize those color changes. So we're going to cut our yarn, leaving a tail of at least 6 to 8 inches. And then I'm going to pull the yarn tail all the way through my last stitch. Then we're going to grab our tapestry needle and thread our yarn tail onto the yarn, or onto the needle here. All right, so now I've got my yarn on my tapestry needle. I'm going to move this stitch marker out of the way to make it easier for you to see. If you're nervous about losing track of the first stitch of the round, you can keep that in place if you'd like. But I'm going to move that out of the way. And with our yarn needle, we're going to skip the first stitch of the round, and we're going to insert our needle from front to back under both loops of the second stitch of the round. And we're going to pull the needle through to the back of the work and pull our yarn tail so it lays flat across that first stitch. And what we're doing is we're replicating that first stitch with our yarn tail, which pulls down the higher side of your work, but also minimizes that jog. So we're going to take our needle and we're going to go in through the top of the last stitch and under the back loop only. And we're going to pull the yarn to the back of the project, and we want to pull our yarn We don't want to pull it too tight that it cinches the work, but we want it to look like there is just the first stitch of the round, that we've not done anything there. So you can weave your yarn ends here if you would like, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to leave mine hanging for a minute because we're going to add our new yarn. And when we do, I'm just going to tie a knot between the two and then leave the yarn hanging inside my project. So we're going to grab our next yarn color. So color B, which would be orange if you're using the traditional colors. I'm going to use a darker shade of purple here. So we're going to do a standing single crochet join, which creates the first stitch of your round and helps to minimize the look of your join when you're doing color changes or just the join in general. So we're going to start with color B, which if you're doing the original candy corn colors is your orange. And we're going to create a slip knot. If you need to see this slower, check out my video here or slow down the video speed in the corner of your player here. I'm just going to start like our magic circle and then just pull the second strand completely under the first and create our slip knot. Then we're going to place our slip knot onto our hook and pull the yarn up to our hook. And then we're going to grab our project. So we want to make sure that we can see the first stitch of the previous round where we did our join. I've made mine a little loose so it's easier for me to see. And I'm going to insert my hook under both strands of that stitch and the join. All right, so we want to insert a hook. Then we're going to grab the working end of our current color. And we're going to yarn over, pull up a loop. You should have 2 loops on your hook. Then yarn over and pull through both loops on your hook. Now that is your standing single crochet completed. It counts as your first stitch and it's a much cleaner join. Normally you would use a slip stitch, a chain 1, and a single crochet. So you're eliminating more like half of the equation here and making it cleaner. So I'm going to put my stitch marker in the top of my stitch there. If you'd like, you can tie your yarn end from your join and your new color in a knot here, but I'm going to wait until I'm further along to do that. So now that we have our join done, we're going to continue on with the rest of our round 4 instructions, and we're going to work 1 single crochet into each of the next 3 stitches. There's 1, 2, and 3. Then we're going to work a single crochet increase into the next stitch. And again, that's those 2 single crochets worked into the same stitch. Then we're going to work 1 single crochet into each of the next 4 stitches. Then we're going to work a single crochet increase into this last stitch here. At the end of round 4, you should have 12 single crochet stitches. So what I'm doing here is I'm just taking my yarn tail from my join and pulling that tighter so that way it brings the 2 ends of my round together. And I'm just going to tie the 2 ends from the beginning of my yarn join at this round and the end of last round. And I'm just going to tie a knot in them to help secure them. And then I'm going to trim them so they're all out of the way so it's easier to see. If you would like, you can just leave these yarn tails as they are inside your project. So then that way they essentially don't need to be worried about. You can just essentially use them as extra stuffing, but I'm just going to cut mine and get them all out of the way. All right, so now we're ready to move on to round 5. All right, so we're starting round 5. So what we're going to do is we're going to move our stitch marker out of the way. And then we're going to start with working 1 single crochet into the first and second stitches. So we're going to insert our hook into that first single crochet, which was our join, and work 1 single crochet. And we're going to place our stitch marker into that stitch. And we'll work 1 single crochet into the next stitch. Then we're going to work a single crochet increase into the next stitch. Back into the same stitch, single crochet. Then we're going to work one single crochet into each of the next 5 stitches. Now we're going to work a single crochet increase into the next stitch. Then we're going to work one single crochet into each of the next 3 stitches. At the end of round 5, you should have 14 stitches in your round. Now we're moving into round 6, so we're going to move our stitch marker out of the way. We're going to work one single crochet into each of the first 6 stitches. So we're going to work our first stitch here, move our stitch marker up, and then one single crochet into each of the next 5 stitches. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Then we're going to work a single crochet increase into this next stitch. Then we're going to work one single crochet into each of the next 6 stitches. In this last stitch here, we're going to work a single crochet increase. At the end of round 6, you should have 16 stitches. And now we're ready to fasten off to change to our next color. So again, we're going to cut our yarn. And we're going to leave a yarn tail of at least 6 inches here. And we're going to pull our yarn tail all the way through. We're going to grab our tapestry needle, place it onto the end of our yarn tail. Again, I'm going to move my stitch marker out of the way so you can see what we're doing. And we're going to take our tapestry needle, skip the first stitch, and work from front to back under both loops of the second stitch, and pull your yarn tail all the way through so it looks like the front loop of the skipped stitch. Then I'm going to hold tension with the yarn and insert my needle from the top under the back loop only of that last stitch of the round. Then I'm going to pull that all the way through to the back and pull it tight so it looks like the normal stitch that was already there. So I'm going to leave that hanging there, and I'm going to grab my third color here. So this would be color C. If you're using the traditional candy corn colors, you would be using the yellow yarn now. And what we're going to do is we're going to create another slip knot to place onto our crochet hook. So now we're going to start round 7 with a standing single crochet. So just like we did with the last color change, we're going to insert our hook under both loops of that first stitch of the round and under the color or the invisible join we did. And then now with our hook in the stitch, we're going to yarn over, pull up a loop, yarn over, pull through both loops. And that's our first stitch completed. I'm going to put my stitch marker in there. And if you prefer, at this point, you can take a moment to tie your 2 yarn ends together. I'm going to do that so I can trim them and get them out of our way. All right, so now we're ready to continue on with round 7. So for round 7, we're just going to work 1 single crochet into each stitch around. We're not going to change our stitch count, so you should still have 16 single crochets in your piece. So if you like to pause your video and work 1 single crochet into each stitch around, I'll be back in just one moment to show you how we're moving into rounds 8 and 9. All right, so I just finished with round 7, and we're going to need to place our safety eyes in round 7, but we can't put them in because if we do right now, the backs will get into the way and we won't be able to crochet in those stitches. So what we're going to need is we're going to need a scrap piece of yarn, and we're just going to insert it into 2 of the stitches for the instructions. So it says we're going to add safety eyes to round 7 with 2 stitches between them. So I'm going to pick 2 stitches. I'm going to pick my first one here and pull the yarn tail of a scrap piece of yarn from front or back to front like so. Then I'm going to skip 2 stitches, 1, 2, and insert my hook into that 3rd stitch and use my hook to grab the other end of my scrap yarn. And I'm going to pull that out to the front. So that way they're hanging out like this. If you're nervous about it falling out or your piece is too short, you can just, tie a small knot into it because it's just scrap. You can cut it out after, right? But that's what we're going to do. We're going to leave that hanging until we can put our safety eyes in. So for rounds 8 and 9, we're just going to work 1 single crochet into each stitch around. I'll do the first couple of stitches of round 8 with you to show you how to work around your scrap yarn. But if you're comfortable with that, you can move on doing 2 rounds of single crochet into each stitch around, and I'll meet you back here at round 10. All right, so for round 8 here, we're working our 1 single crochet, moving up our stitch marker, and then I'm just going to single crochet until I get to my scrap yarn here. So now that I've got my scrap yarn, you want to be mindful that we've got this tail on the inside of our piece. And we want to make sure that when we crochet into that stitch, we're not picking up or grabbing this yarn tail. So I'm going to pull that to the side with my left hand here and insert my hook into that stitch, making sure I'm not grabbing any of that yarn. And then I'll single crochet. Then I'll single crochet to the next yarn tail here, but again, we want to make sure we're not grabbing that yarn on the inside. So I'm pushing it down with my middle finger as I crochet so as not to catch it. And then again, pulling the yarn out of the way, you want to make sure you've got a clear entry into that stitch and then single crochet. All right, so that's how you avoid your yarn tail. Make sure it can still flow through freely, and then continue to work 1 single crochet into each stitch of the round. And then repeat working 1 single crochet into each stitch for round 9. I'll meet you back here in just a moment to show you how we're moving into round 10. So I just finished round 9, and I'm confident now that if I put my safety eyes in, I can continue to crochet with the safety eyes in. If you're using bigger safety eyes, that could be an issue. So you want to make sure that you have crocheted far enough so that way they're not going to obstruct your crocheting. So that might mean you have to continue to crochet around 10 or even 11 before you're able to put those in. So I'm going to put mine in now. I'm using a 9mm safety eye for my toy here today, and I'm going to insert the safety eye from front to back here. And then I can put the back of my eye on. If you have your safety eye backs, sometimes you'll get these flat ones. You can tell which side is the front and the back because the front has a tiny little, what would you call it? An indent in the center here. It might be hard to see on the camera, but you want to put the indent side down. So grabbing the back of the post here, we're just going to insert that onto the post and push it down as far as we can. You want to hear that clicking sound. And then I'm going to insert my other safety eye into the other spot where my yarn tail is. And then again, put our back on the post and push it down as far as you can. Oh, and I didn't follow my own instructions. So again, you want the indent side down on the post. Goodness. I'll do that again. You want indent side down on the backing on the post, and you want to push that all the way down. You want to go as far as you can get it. And then you should be able to just pull your yarn tail out. All right, and there are my safety eyes. All right, so now we're moving into round 10. Make sure that you have your toy stuffing handy because we're going to start stuffing at the end of round 10. So we're going to move our stitch marker out of the way. And in this round, all of our stitches are going to be worked in what's called the back loop only. If you take a look at the tops of your stitches, you'll see that each stitch has a loop that is closest to you and one that's furthest to you. The one closest to you here is called the front loop only, and the one back here is called the back loop. So when we're working in the back loop only, it means that we're inserting our hook under only that back loop. So we're going to start by working a single crochet in the back loop only. So we're going to insert our hook through the top of the stitch, under that back loop, and towards the inside of our project. Then we'll single crochet as normal. Then we'll put our stitch marker into that stitch, and we're ready to continue. So now we're going to work a single crochet decrease. Now, most of the time when you're working a single crochet decrease in amigurumi, you do what's called an invisible decrease, and those are worked using the front loop only. But you can do it using the back loop only, and you should do it if your instructions for that round say to work in the back loop only. So I'm going to show you how to do that decrease. So I'm going to insert my hook under the back loop only of the first stitch. Then we're going to twist our hook to pick up the back loop only of the next stitch as well. It could be a little tight, that's okay. We're going to yarn over and then pull the loop through both of those back loops. Again, could be a little tight. And then we single crochet as normal. All right, and then we're going to work back loop only, one single crochet into the next stitch. And then our single crochet decrease. So again, we're working in that back loop only. So pick up the back loop of the first stitch. And then pick up the back loop only of the next stitch. And then single crochet as normal. All right, so we're going to repeat this pattern of one single crochet in the first stitch, single crochet decrease in the next until the end of the round. I'm going to do this next one with you to show you how to do a normal decrease if you're struggling to pick up those back loops only. Okay, so back loop only, single crochet in the first stitch. Then if we're just going to do a back loop only single crochet decrease, we can do this. We insert our hook into the back loop only of the first stitch, yarn over, pull up the loop, insert into the back loop only of the next stitch, yarn over and pull up a loop, and then you yarn over and pull through all three loops on your hook. It makes it a little bit bulkier. However, it is easier if you're struggling to pick up those back loop only, especially if you're like me and you're using this worsted weight yarn. It's getting a little tight here, so you absolutely can use that decrease and your toy will turn out just fine. All right, so again, we're back loop only, one single crochet into the next stitch. And then we're going to do that back loop only single crochet decrease. Now I'm going to do the normal one here. All right, and again, back loop only, one single crochet into the next stitch. All right, now we're going to do a single crochet decrease in the back loop only. Then you should have one stitch left and you're going to work one single crochet into the back loop only. All right, so I'm at the end of round 10. You should have 11 stitches when you're done. And this is the point where we're going to stuff our toy. So we're going to grab a little bit of the toy stuffing, separate it with your fingers to loosen up the fibers, and then you're just going to use your finger to insert the stuffing into the toy. And you're just going to repeat the process, adding more stuffing So when you're stuffing your toy, it's kind of an art form. You do need practice. What you want to do is you want to stuff it as firmly as you can without stretching your stitches. And for amigurumi, that's a very fine line. So you want to add a little bit of stuffing as you go. You don't want to add big chunks because you'll also get clumpy stuffing and you'll have lumps in your toy. And when you're stuffing your toy, you're putting your finger inside and you're feeling around for gaps in the stuffing that you can either shift the stuffing around to fill or add more stuffing to fill. If you have gaps in your stuffing, as stuffing does break down over time, and the more gaps you have, the less time that your toy will have in its lifespan. So you want to make sure that it's stuffed firmly, and a well-stuffed toy should feel like a firm, ripe orange when pressed. So I've got as much stuffing as I feel I can get in here right now. Don't feel any gaps. And then I'm going to move on to round 11. So to start round 11, we're going to move that stitch marker out of the way, and we're going to do a single crochet decrease. Again, we've talked about in the last round the invisible decrease. So in this round, we're going to work in the front loop only to do these decreases. So we're going to insert our hook up and under the front loop of the first stitch and under the front loop of the second stitch, if I can do it. There you go. Then we'll yarn over and single crochet, and that's your invisible decrease. And we're going to place our stitch marker under that stitch, and then we're going to move on. So we're going to do another single crochet decrease, again under the front loops of the first and second stitch. And we'll yarn over and pull up a loop, and then yarn over and pull up a loop. So we'll do another front loop only decrease or invisible decrease. So up and under the front loop of the first stitch, up and under the front loop of the second, and then single crochet as normal. And we're just going to continue these single crochet decreases until there's one stitch remaining. All right, so I've got one stitch remaining here, and I'm going to insert my hook into that stitch and work one single crochet. You should have 6 stitches at the end of this round. So let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. Now we're ready to finish off our toy. If you need to add more stuffing, this is your last opportunity to add it. I'm going to cut a yarn tail. I'm going to leave a tail probably of at least 8 to 10 inches. Then I'm going to pull the yarn all the way through my last stitch. And now we're going to close up our toy using a technique called the ultimate finish. And we're going to use our tapestry needle to do that. So thread your yarn tail onto your tapestry needle. Then I'm going to move my stitch marker out of the way. And we're going to use our tapestry needle to weave our yarn tail through the front loops only of every stitch of the last round. So using your tapestry needle up and under the front loop of the first stitch, pull that tight, up and under the front loop of the next stitch, and pull that tight. We're going to continue that until we've done this with every stitch. There's 3. And 6. So now that I have woven through all of the stitches of the last round, I'm going to pull that tight. And so what you're left with here is this funny little nub, right? We don't want that on our toy. But so what we're going to do is we're going to take our needle and insert it through the center of the last round. So it's essentially the gap that's in the center of the toy here. And we're going to take our yarn, our needle here, and we're going to pull it out through any stitch in the toy. You want to make sure you're coming through one of the gaps in the stitches. You're not picking up any yarn in this point. You don't want to bring your needle through the yarn because it can cause issues with our next steps. So we're coming out anywhere and we're pulling the yarn through the center there. And watch what happens when you pull your yarn. It's going to flatten that all out. You might need to help it a little bit with your finger, but now it's nice and flat. Now, if your toy is not sitting up on its own because you have the stuffing is going to round your toy out because it's fabric, right? We don't have anything firm in the bottom. So what we can do now is we use our yarn tail to flatten the bottom of our toy. So I'm going to use my yarn tail. I'm going to pull that down a little bit. Then I'm going to go back into the same stitch I came out of. And I'm going to come out through the bottom of the toy, just off center. I'm going to pull the yarn all the way in. Then I'm going to go either through the center or off center again to go back into the toy. And out another part of the toy. Now you can tie a knot in this if you'd like. I'll actually do that. I don't want it to be super close to the toy. I want it to be close enough that I can put it back into the toy. So I'm going to go into this next stitch here and out through the side somewhere. My stuffing is super dense, so bear with me here a second. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to use my yarn tail to pull that knot into the toy. So the knot, what it does is it creates a little indent in the bottom of the toy. It's barely noticeable, but what it does is it allows it to stand up freely on its own without being easily knocked over, and it's no longer rounded. All right, so then at this point, you can weave in your ends. If you had already cut your yarn, you can do the same thing with a separate piece of yarn. You would just tie a knot in the end of your yarn, bring it in through the toy, out through the bottom, and then essentially use your yarn tail to create this little indent in the bottom. To weave in our ends, we're going to tie a knot or two into the yarn tail. Again, we want to do it as close to the toy as possible. That didn't line up. And then we're going to go back into our toy through the same stitch we came out of and out somewhere else. Again, we don't want to catch the yarn. We just want to come out through one of the spaces in the stitches. And we're going to pull that knot into our toy. If you have a little indent, you can just use your needle to pull the fabric back in place. And you can repeat that a couple of times, pulling the knots in and out. The more times you do that, the more secure it will be. I'm going to finish mine here. And when I cut my yarn, I'm going to pull my yarn. I'm putting tension on it while I cut the yarn, and it will pull the yarn a little bit back inside the toy for you. If you have a little bit sticking out like I do, because mine is super little, you're going to just use your scissors or your tapestry needle to just tuck that back inside. So there is our little mini candy corn here. And what we're going to do here is we are going to add a smile and some embroidery details around the eyes. Now, if you're using the Burnette blanket yarn, you're going to be using a worsted weight yarn for this next step. Because mine is so little, I'm going to be using embroidery thread. Let's start with embroidering the eyes. So I'm going to use probably about 10 to 12 inches of embroidery thread here. And I'm going to hold it double. I'm going to cut my embroidery thread and I'm going to thread it onto my needle. Again, you're going to be using worsted weight yarn for this. I call for about 1 yard in the pattern of worsted weight yarn. When you have your yarn or embroidery thread doubled, you're going to tie a knot in the end of both strands of your yarn or embroidery thread. I like to double knot it here. And now you're ready to start. So you're going to want to insert your needle anywhere through the back of the toy, as long as you're coming out near through the stitch closest to the top center point of the eye. And I'll show you that here. So I'm going to pull that, and I want to pull the knots into the toy. If you'd prefer, you can leave this out and then tie the other end to it. I'm going to pull my knots into the toy. And then we're going to insert our needle into the stitch closest to the bottom center of the eye. When we do that, we want to bring the tip of our needle out through the opposite eye. Just makes it easier to do the embroidery for the next eye. I'm going to pull that all the way through. We want to try and keep the strands even. And what we're doing is we're just going to have that lay flat along the side of the eye here. And that just adds a little bit more detail. Now, if you're using a sinker style eye, because there are different styles of safety eyes, and I'll show you those two examples here. So what I'm using is a standard safety eye. It has a flat black here. It has a flat back here. And then we have the sinker style eyes. Sinker style eyes have a wider side, as you can see, and they sink into the toy when you put the backing on, because the backing is cup shaped. I have one from a larger set of eyes that I was working with earlier. So they have these cup style backings, and when you insert them, they sit inside the cup, and it does eat up a little bit of your fabric when you put them on, but they are really hard to get out of your toy. If you're using these sinker style eyes, which I did use in the larger sizes of the candy corns, you might want to add a stitch in or two in the embroidery thread or yarn on the side here, because what that does is will help it sit still along the side of the eye. Because the sinker style sinks into the fabric, it can be harder to get your yarn to lay flat against the safety eye. If you need to see that, you can see that in the photo tutorial, which I've shared on my blog, loopylam.com, and the link's in the description. So now that I've got one of the eyes done, we're going to do the second. Because I've come out the bottom of the eye, now I want to go to the stitch closest to the top center of the eye. And then I like to come out the same stitch I came into the toy in. You don't have to, you can come out anywhere else. And I'm going to pull that. And I want to get my strands to lay across the side of the eye here. I find this much easier with worsted weight yarn because it's not as splitty as your embroidery thread. All right, and there we go. So I've got the whites of our eyes. And you can either, if you have enough tail, you can tie them together in a knot, or you can do what we did when we're weaving in our ends for our project, and you can just tie a couple of knots in your yarn and then pull the knots inside your toy. I'm going to tie another knot. And then I'm going to go back into the same stitch and pull all of that inside the toy. Again, if you can see some of it sticking out, you use your needle to just poke it back in, or your scissors. Then I'm going to cut my tail here, and then again, give it a little encouragement to hide inside the toy. All right, so now we're going to embroider our smile. We've got the black yarn or black embroidery thread held double on our tapestry needle. I've got about 8 to 10 inches or up to a yard. More yarn is always better in case you're making any mistakes. And we're going to insert our needle through the back of the toy, through one of the stitches. We want to come in through one of the holes in the stitches, not catching any of the yarn. And we're going to come out through the front of the face where we want the smile to start. Now, when you're using the blanket yarn, you have a lot more space to create your mouth. Also, I probably should have used smaller safety eyes for my worsted weight yarn, but this is the smallest size that I currently have, so we're going with it. So we're going to bring our needle out through the stitch where we want the top of our mouth to be. And I'm going to pull that all the way through, and I'm going to pull the knot into my toy. Not super concerned about hiding it at this point. I'll fix that later. Now I'm going to go into the stitch I want the other side of my mouth to be. So I'm going to insert my needle here, and I want the bottom part of the V to be about here. So I'm going to insert here and come out a little higher there. And I'm going to come out here. What I want to do is I want to have my needle coming out on top of the loop of the yarn. Now it's hard to tell at this point because it's so big, but we'll see it in just a moment as I pull this yarn through. So you see how it's coming through the center of the loop? We want to pull that here. Then you can see how we've got the start of our smile here. We're going to go back into the same stitch we came out of, and that's going to hold the center of the smile down and kind of round it out slightly. So I'm going to pull the needle out through the back of the toy again. And then I'm going to gently pull this. We don't want to pull it so tight that it cinches the fabric, but we do want to pull it just enough to hide that stitch inside the toy, but kind of rounds out our smile. Now it's a little wonky. Again, the eyes are far too big for this, but it will work the same as this on a larger toy when you have a little more space. And if you want to see this again, or you want to see the photo tutorial is available over on my blog, loopylamb.com, linked in the description box below. So now that I've got my little crooked smile on here, I can tie a couple of knots here. And then we're just going to pull those knots into the toy as we've done before. I'm just going to do it the one time here. I do recommend doing this more than once. And then we're just going to tuck in the ends inside our toy. And that's it. That's how you crochet my mini crochet candy corn pattern. If you want to make it in the other sizes, you can find the 4 other sizes in the ad-free PDF available in my Ravelry and Etsy shops, and I've linked to those in the description box below. I hope that you found this tutorial helpful. If you did, please hit that like button and please consider subscribing to my channel. And if you like free crochet patterns, please check out my blog, loopylamb.com, where I've got hundreds of free crochet patterns and step-by-step tutorials just like this one. Thanks for watching, friends. Happy crocheting, and I'll see you next time.